Good evening, UNC family, and thank you for those of you who are joining us on Facebook, YouTube, TV and radio Jagrati, and all other forms of media. Thank you very much for continuing to fly the flag of the UNC proudly and flying it high. It is you, our UNC members, who make our great party strong. And I want to say a special thank you to all of the speakers here tonight for their excellent presentations. And thank you to the Honorable Mrs. Kamala Persad-Bissessar, the political leader of the United National Congress and leader who will take Trinidad and Tobago safely into economic prosperity in the future. We in the United National Congress had a very interesting week as we stood up in the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago for the democracy of our country. As you all know, UNC family, last week we witnessed a very historic event. Last Thursday, the United National Congress, led by the Honorable Kamala Persad-Bissessar, entered Parliament with a motion that was meant to ensure Trinidad and Tobago would not descend into a tyrannical regime. Last Thursday, we in the UNC stood up for democracy and for the rule of law while the PNM government tried to mute the voices of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. People who were simply asking for transparency and accountability. But there are some facts that you cannot keep a secret. They are facts that we all know. As it stands, Trinidad and Tobago is without a commissioner of police, and the Police Service Commission collapsed, creating a constitutional crisis for us. But what is the rest of the truth? There are real questions that must be answered. What really happened with the Police Service Commission is meritless. Who is the high-ranking government official said to have intercepted the list? And so no matter how much they try to use silence or distractions, we as a country must be resolutely focused on getting the answers to these questions. All right-thinking citizens must agree that these issues, which surround the highest offices in our land, that they must be ventilated in the full view of the public. Safeguarding our democracy requires us to stand up in the face of challenges, and as such, we must protect the integrity of our leadership offices. And sometimes, in standing up for democracy, our voices must rise higher and louder than they ordinarily are. And this is all in defense of our Trinidad and Tobago that we need and deserve. UNC family, we will continue to defend the rights and freedoms of the citizens of our land. We will continue to defend our Constitution, and we will continue to protect this nation from a dictatorial PNM regime. The PNM will not silence us. They can try to mute our voices, but they cannot silence all of the voices of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And I want to take this opportunity to amplify the voices of the people of Tabaquite. While the government is making fundamental mistakes at the highest levels, they are also failing to deliver basic necessities to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Imagine, as a member of parliament, I have to stand on a wooden bridge in Lightbourne, a major concern in my constituency because residents are unable to do a simple thing like get to and from work. The roads remain closed, the bridge remains condemned, and yet still the PNM can find all other things to do but be accountable to people of Trinidad and Tobago for how our money is being spent. While they continue to tell us that our politics must be silent and quiet, I must stand here as the MP for Tabaquite to amplify the voices of the people of Springvale, Grand Couva, Forest Park, Montague Lands, Caratal, and the other villages that continue to lament water shortages. Imagine, in 2021, in Trinidad and Tobago, a land that has seen very serious wealth, we still cannot get a regular supply of a basic necessity like water in some of our areas. We cannot get a basic necessity like a roadway or stable bridges to go to and from our places of work. All the while, the government is telling us that we must remain silent and that these issues, such as poor infrastructure, poor leadership, and a lack of accountability on how the money has been spent over the last 6 years, they will bring distraction after distraction, but they cannot and will not tell us why they cannot deliver on the job that they were elected to do. Friends, tonight I also want to speak about a very critical issue, very important to all of us, and that is the current state of our education sector. You would have seen in the PNM's disastrous budget for 2022, as our Right Honorable Leader rightly called, a war on the people. But in this PNM budget, it wasn't just a war on the working men and women of this country. They are also waging a war on our children by the utter contempt that they have shown towards our students and our teachers. I know the past 2 years they have not been easy for primary, secondary, and tertiary students. The COVID-19 pandemic has brought many challenges to the education system. But you know what? A UNC government did not need a pandemic to tell us that digital learning was the learning of the future, and that technology, such as laptops, and connectivity would be critical for all students going forward. The laptops were snatched away from our students so that the PNM can funnel money into other activities. Imagine coming into office in 2015, deciding that students did not need laptops, and then now scrambling in 2020 to provide laptops for students, giving us an Adopt a School program, promising laptops here, there, and everywhere. And today, as I stand here before you in October 2021, millions of dollars later, and still many students are without devices and without connectivity. Imagine that in this discussion in Parliament, where we are talking about the fact that the PNM has consistently presented over $50 billion worth of expenditure over time, every budget bigger than the last, and they would not tell us why our students are still unable to access online school for want of a device or connectivity. Under the PNM, millions of dollars have been spent on purchasing laptops, and Minister of Education claimed in Parliament that there was a successful means test application, and that students and guardians were reaching out, and that persons had been given devices. So then, Madam Minister, how is it that as I stand here, I still have several calls, not just from my own constituency, but from persons across the country who are still unable to access a device for their students to get online? In last year's budget, that is for fiscal 2021, the budget presented in 2020, the PNS promised to give our students MiFi devices. Did you know that over a year later, less than 5,000 MiFi devices have been given out to students and teachers? And this year, they've come back with the same empty promises. And what we know for a fact, while they make these promises on one hand, on the other hand, the statistics are scary and they are startling. We know that at the beginning of this year, approximately 47,000 students were left behind or dropped out of the school system altogether because they did not have means of accessing online classes. And that statistic tells us how many persons never logged on. It does not tell us how many students logged on once, maybe twice, and then were unable to continue logging on because they were using their parents' phone or the phone of a sibling and unable to have a real device conducive to doing schoolwork at home. In my constituency of Tabakit, we face a dual challenge. Firstly, many schools and homes simply do not have the physical technology needed to execute online classes. Many students, like I said before, are using their parents' cell phone, a data plan. I've had families come to me because they are unable to have electricity at their home. They are charging these devices in their cars and giving it to their students, to their children, just so that they have a fighting chance. Because remember, education is a great equalizer. If you are able to educate your children, there's a chance for your family to have a better life in the future. And so what we're seeing is scary not just for today, but scary for the next generation as well. Even worse, the fact remains that we have no real-time data of how many students have dropped out of the system because the Minister of Education has fallen down on the job from day one. All of the systems seem to be reactionary. Every time a problem arises, you rush and react to try to fix a problem, plugging holes left, right, and center. So there's no conducive planning. There's no sense of what we are doing today will help with tomorrow. Just a decision rattled off at a press conference, and that's it. That's what we're told. We're told last week that all forms 4, 5, and 6 students will be back out to school, vaccinated or unvaccinated. Imagine in a system as critical as our education system, those in charge refuse to do their homework. Imagine that. Our students are the most valuable resource that this country has. They are the next generation of teachers, lawyers, entrepreneurs, and artists. When we mismanage our education system, we are mismanaging and mishandling the future of this country. And that we will not be silent about. That we will not allow them to mute our mics or shut us down when we talk about the future of this nation. Again, being told that all of the Form 4s, 5s, and 6s would be back out to school, vaccinated or unvaccinated. I know these students have endured a lot. Their parents have endured a lot. And let us not forget, these are examination classes. The pressure would have been on these children and their parents with or without the pandemic and with or without Vicky decision-making from the ministry. But what is happening here is that we are being told we will have a normal return and safety precautions will be taken to keep our students and our teachers and all those participating in the education sector safe. But for nearly 2 years, the Ministry of Education has failed to plan ahead. They have failed to develop a coherent strategy, and they have failed to deal with educating our students in a systematic manner in this pandemic. And so we must have very real concerns, a very real fear that when you announce this plan, if you fail to implement this in a secure and safe manner, this means the actual health and wellness of our students, our teachers, those participating in the education sector, and all of their families. So the Ministry of Education needs to be very careful that they do not drop the ball on this one. For all the ministers talk about hybrid learning system, this decision to return into in-class, in-school learning is an admission of failure. It is an admission that the systems they mandated schools to implement were not inclusive and they left students out. It is an admission that they refused for over a year and a half to engage in genuine, meaningful consultation with stakeholders and will simply make things up as they go along. It is an admission that they have no problem passing the buck to schools when they are the ones responsible for developing strategies and policies. At the last minute, we heard about a splash dash proposal to separate vaccinated students from unvaccinated ones without an explanation as to how this was going to work. Without any evaluation of the varied needs at different schools in terms of manpower and technology. And without any real concern as to how unvaccinated students will manage. Then we heard the absurd plan that unvaccinated teachers will still teach physical classes where only vaccinated students were allowed. Now imagine an entire nation has to come together to tell the ministry that simply does not make sense. What is the nexus of this plan? What are you basing this plan on when all of the components are so haphazard? Now that this plan has very predictably failed, we see the ministry is now allowing students to go back to classes regardless of their vaccination status and trying to convince us, remarkably, that this was all part of the plan from the beginning. This minister, it is clear, has no plan. She's always reacting. And the worst part about it is that she's not even aware that there is no planning strategy, just making it up as it goes along. So what is going to happen if, heaven forbid, we need to go back into a lockdown? Because a part of a cohesive planning strategy is not simply burying your head in the sands as to what are potential outcomes of decision you are making today. What happens? What is the plan? What is the plan if we have to deal with students how are we dealing with the students who've been forced out of the system, who would have missed nearly 2 years of classes and now are asked to return to in-person classes? How are we ensuring that they are able to keep up? And then how are we ensuring that our teachers are adequately provided for so that they can do this hard making up work, which again is through no fault of their own. A failure of the policymakers will now be felt by those persons who are in the system. What is the plan to help students whose parents are experiencing one of the worst economic crises of our time? We are seeing students who can't even afford to bring lunch to school, far less afford uniform, books, and transport. And let us not forget, the rising cost of living has seen the increase of food prices, transportation costs, while seeing a number of persons unemployed. These are the types of the questions that the Minister of Education was unable to answer in our Standing Finance Committee. When I posed questions to hold the minister to account, where was the money for the learning devices being placed? How will it be accounted for? How many devices have been provided thus far that will impact our e-testing program? She could not even remember the explanation that she gave last year. Evidence that they're making it up as they go along. The complete inaction and incompetence from this PNM administration and the lackadaisical manner in which Minister of Education Act is leading us to lose a generation, and its detrimental effects will be felt in the years to come. So I say to you, as I close, my UNC family, join us and let us take a united stance against tyranny and repression. Let us raise our voices against persons who want to hold office and not deliver on their promises. Let us say enough is enough. We are no longer going to accept excuses when we want delivery. And so as your UNC representative, all of us will continue to raise our voices to amplify your voice in Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you very much.